Hello, you are listening to Radio Snooker with Nick Metcalf, where radio meets snooker at last. It's good to have you with me, folks, for a new broadcast. And for the first time in this long and hot summer, I'm not on my lonesome. I have a special guest with me. Now, we've often remarked in the past, haven't we, that snooker has been sold a little short on the literature front. But boy, have some good people been putting that right in recent years. I'm delighted to say there's another terrific new snooker book on the market. And I have the author of that book right here. A former sports journalist with a lifelong love of snooker, this man had a very specific objective: to see a maximum break made live. He has written about that pursuit of a live 147 in his book, To the Max. I am very happy to be joined by Chris Shaw. Chris, it's great to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Nick. Yeah, great to be with you.
Yeah, well, it's smashing. Really looking forward to finding out lots more about your brilliant book. Before we get more into the specifics of that book, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit more about your background and particularly focusing on your time in journalism.
Sure, yeah. Well, I've always been a big fan of sports. I grew up in Liverpool, and I'm the generation of those who grew up as well during the time of the snooker boom. So I was very fortunate in many ways that I was there right at the start of the early 80s and all of that. In terms of sports journalism, it's something I've done since I was probably about 11 or 12, something I've had a real passion for. And I got into sports journalism and ended up working in Lancashire, which is where I still live, for regional papers. And I also had a 2-year stint with PA before I went into public relations. So during my time in sports journalism, we had obviously the usual suspects of football and cricket, but we also, because we were based in Preston, where the UK Championship took place, we had a rota of 3 or 4 of us on the sports desk, and we'd go and cover the snooker at the Guildhall in Preston. Now, I'd always enjoyed snooker, but it was only as a sort of young journalist there that I realised how little I knew about the sport. And I remember one occasion actually when I was in a press conference, and Doug Mountjoy's in there, and I really felt out of my depth. What are you going to ask this guy? And it, but actually being around snooker and seeing it behind the scenes was really quite interesting. And one of the big differences, I think, which many probably journalists will relate to this as well, is back in those days, there was a lot of sponsorship, and also the players were being brought in for press conferences and were happily engaging with the media. So Jimmy White will come in and have a chat with the media and all the rest of it. And then I was contrasting that with Saturday afternoons when I'd be at the football, and there was a very different relationship between the media and football players, even in lower divisions, which was interesting. But just going back to the job, it was a case of filing copy, and then an hour or so later, the newspaper would land on your desk with your article, and we thought that was amazing that it was so quick that you were writing for an
Yeah.
evening paper. Fast forward to now, and it seems comical now with deadlines and digital. But I was involved in sports journalism for about 10 years, and was very fortunate to cover some fascinating events. I was there when Blackburn Rovers won the league title at Anfield in 1995, was one real highlight. And also covered Test cricket. We were very fortunate in our patch that we had Lancashire cricket, we had Test cricket, and boxing, which of course Barry Hearn used to promote at the Guildhall. So there was a lot of
Mm.
interest and variety in sports journalism in those days. Sadly, not quite the same these days. And of course, the Guildhall, unfortunately, in Preston is no longer in use for sport, which is a real shame. So yeah, I did that for 10 years and then went and did other things. including sports PR, but always have had this sort of desire to get back and doing some form of sports journalism. And about 3 years ago, an opportunity presented itself, and that was the origins of To the Max. And yeah, maybe we can talk a bit more about what happened then. But yeah, it was getting back into sports journalism was an ambition I had.
Oh, that's an interesting story. And I mean, what a venue, the Guildhall in the
Yeah,
history of snooker, totally fabled,
yeah.
one of the great venues, no question about it. So you've got obviously a strong journalism background. You say the opportunity came about. I mean, tell us in more detail what you mean by
Sure.
that.
Well, it was quite funny because you have these ideas of things you like to do, where you'd like to visit or things you might want to do just as for hobbies and interests. And I'd always had a desire to, write a book about something to do with a sporting tour. And snooker was definitely a sport that I'd always liked. But I must confess, I did have a spell when I wasn't watching snooker as much as I had been in my younger days, and certainly when I was a journalist. But funny enough, it was actually at the Guildhall, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. Probably one of the last tournaments to take place there. I went to watch a match, and I just really enjoyed the ambience of it. You could just go after work. I found it really relaxing, even though the players were under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And I realized it is a sport that you can just let wash over you. You can absorb it and really get a lot of enjoyment out of it as a fan. So that then led on to a situation where 3 years ago I was able to take voluntary redundancy, and I was in a position where I had a sabbatical, a year off, which I described as my 50 something gap year. You usually take your gap years when you're about 20, 21, don't you? I had mine, I had mine in my 50s. And I thought I would love to follow snooker, but then what's the aim? And I thought, well, the obvious aim, the thing that I would love to see in any snooker tournament is a maximum break. I know we've now had 246 of them as we record this interview, but
No,
I
there's been two made in the last hour now. It's
I'm
248.
out of
Sorry.
touch.
I'll carry on.
It did feel like that during July and August, didn't it? But I thought, no, the 147, the maximum, is something that would be wonderful to experience in a venue. And I was a bit envious of those who had done. You see the clips on YouTube and the TV, particularly when O'Sullivan made his in 1997 and Steve Davis 15 years before that, the first one. So I came up with the idea. The idea for the book, by the way, didn't come as one sort of inspiration, if you like. It was generally one idea led to the other, led to the other. I now had a redundancy payout, so I had time on my hands and the perfect opportunity to follow the snooker tour. And fortunately, I got a very, very encouraging wife. She, when I put it to her, she was very, yeah, she go for it, do it, which is really important as well. So everything fell into place, and I then planned it, and I decided, thought, well, okay, you come up with this madcap scheme. How are you going to make it work? And I thought, well, there's no guarantee I can. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm in the lap of the gods here. It's how the players play. But what I can do is I can attend 147 hours of live snooker around the tour. I definitely need to go to China because that's so important now to the whole ecosystem of the game, if you like. I also would like to go to somewhere in Europe, and the German Masters was the obvious opportunity. And I wanted to take in the three Triple Crown events and also the home nations. And so I went to most of the matches, certainly domestically on the tour in one season. Went to the venue with a notepad and watched as much snooker as I could, and kept my fingers crossed to check whether or not I would see a 147. So that was, that was the theme of it.
Well, it's a brilliant theme. I mean, you've asked a selection of us, if I can
Yeah,
say us. I'm
yeah,
one of those in the book. There's
yeah,
journalists, different personalities involved in the game, and lots of great voices. What the
yeah,
147 break might mean to them, or if they
yeah,
can put into words what is it about this achievement.
yeah,
For my listeners right now,
sure.
how would you sum up? Because you're right. We've seen a lot more in recent times, but it's
Mm,
still only 200 odd.
yeah.
It's not 2000 odd. It's still 200 odd. Let's put it in perspective. What is it about that piece of snooker perfection that works so well for you?
I like the fact that um, it is perfection, it is excellence. It's generally over a period of time, about 10 or 15 minutes, which is actually quite a nice time to have a cup of tea and watch one as well. So it
Hmm,
fits into that practical life experience for the sports fan. But I think for me, one of the exciting things and one of the wonderful things about the 147 is knowing how difficult it is to play the game. I mean, my
yeah.
ability to say it's modest, I'm being generous, you know.
Hmm,
Um, so the sheer skill required to compile a 147, but also you've got this wonderful element of luck, haven't you? And things have to fall into place for a 147 to happen.
of course.
And as it gets nearer to the end, when the players are looking to clear up the colours, that's when you feel the excitement from the crowd. I think I've described it as being like a bit of a drama where you go through various stages in the best dramas, from promise to you know obstacles you have to overcome, and then if a 147 is achieved right at the end, you've then got the celebration and jubilation at the end. And also, human nature being what it is, we're also interested in players who narrowly miss out on 147s, and of course there's been quite a few famous examples of them as well. So I think if I'm summarizing, it's the celebration of seeing something excellent in the sporting arena. And I've been lucky enough to see, great fast bowlers in Test cricket. I remember seeing Dennis Lillee, for instance, playing for Australia in the Ashes back in the early 80s, and that was a really memorable experience. So excellence, perfection, high levels of quality, that they're the kind of things that I like to watch in a 147.
Yeah, you've hit on something I really liked towards the end there. I liked everything you said, but the stuff you say about watching the greats in sport in great arenas is something that I
Yeah,
absolutely love.
that's
But I
right.
like your 10, 15 minutes thing.
Yeah,
One thing that always comes to my mind, and some of the best broadcasters in the sport have always had a great way of explaining this, I think, that it sort of it encompasses or takes in everybody, that everyone in that arena, even if it's backstage, if it's the other players for the practice room, all the fans, obviously, sometimes another table, everyone remembers Bill Werbenick
mm,
poking his head round, but really in smaller ways, that always happens now, pretty much. I like the way that everyone suddenly becomes invested in this moment. That's a
right.
great thing about it as well.
Yeah,
And it's just that, yeah, as you say, it is excellence. It builds up to that remarkable drama. And as you say, luck. Listen, who doesn't remember one of the most famous of them all, Cliff Thorburn? It wouldn't have happened if you hadn't have fluked that red
yeah,
to start. I
that's
mean,
right.
isn't that just part of the magic of sport? You put 15 reds, 15 blacks, all the colours, you start with a fluke. I mean,
Yeah,
there's always something interesting. I mean, and often there's multiple things interesting about each 147, of course, but the path that each player goes and the moments. I mean, Cliff's yellow, brilliant yellow during that comes to mind as well. There's always something. Steve's tough black to get that
yeah,
first one, very hard black.
yeah,
It's just I can see you lighting up there. I mean,
yeah.
I shouldn't be saying this.
Really,
You've written the book about it. There are just so many wonderful moments, aren't there?
that's right. It's Davis getting left in no man's land towards the end of that 147 and Oldham, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that I've described them in the book as like, a high wire acts where you think, it's are they going to fall away here, or are they going to achieve it? I think the other thing about 147s and involving everyone, Nick, is to use a music analogy. I think the 147 is like the time in a concert when a band's played a lot of good stuff, but they haven't played the best
Oh
best
yeah.
melody. And then they play
Yeah,
it, and everybody comes alive. And I think it's a similar comparison. I think with 147s, it involves everybody.
I like
Everybody's in
that.
the air, you know.
Maybe the encore. It's a bit of a musical
That's
cliche.
right.
That most
Yeah,
bands do an encore. Maybe that's the blue, pink, and black.
that's it.
The ultimate conclusion.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
I like I like that. So we know you got the idea for the book. We
Yeah,
know you find the maximum special. You look at the history of it during you. I mean, how many events did you go to?
I went to 18 events. So that includes qualifiers. So I went to the Ponds Forge qualifiers for the International Championships. That was where it all began in Sheffield, appropriately enough. And it ended as well at Sheffield for the semi-final of the World Championships. This is when the Kyle Wilson won. In between that, I went to as I say, all the home nations events. So I went to those four. And I should also point out that I went to the tournaments at different stages.
Mm.
So, for instance, the English Open at Brentwood would have been quarter-final Friday. Other times I might have been at an event in the early rounds, such as the Scottish Open in Edinburgh. And I went to three finals, I think it was. Yeah, three finals. So as well as the qualifiers, where you can, of course, see multiple tables, which gives you more opportunity to hopefully to catch your 147. I wanted to watch those 147 hours of live snooker at different stages of tournaments to give me a wider picture. And that was quite interesting. And um, one one thing I noticed was the experience that the fans were having at these events and how it could differ from tournament to tournament. So that was really interesting. And I think what I would say is in the season I was following the tour, many sort of initiatives were coming into place to involve the fans more. So you had more activities going on in the fan zones. You had more opportunities for kids to come in. And the thing that I particularly liked was the atmosphere in Manchester, where right in the middle of Manchester, they got lots of involvement from the community, and it was a well received tournament. I know Ronnie O'Sullivan at the time spoke about how much he enjoyed the environment and the facilities. So I saw quite a good got a good well, I felt I got a good insight into what it's like to be a fan at these tournaments because there's a big difference, I think, between the fan experience and certainly the many of the media, because many of the media have to be in a press room watching the action on TV, filing copy or doing live radio broadcasts, for instance. So they don't often spend as much time in the arena as you might imagine. So I wanted to be in with the fans, experiencing it as they would. And then after I'd seen the 147 hours, that's when I got round to interviewing more players and people like yourselves, in the media, referees, officials, and anybody else who has an opinion about 147s, which fortunately was pretty much everybody.
That's the thing. You can't be involved with snooker, can you, and
I'm
not
not
have an
having
opinion on it?
no.
It's impossible. And of course, what the great thread that comes throughout the book, you are meeting the different characters, even if they're people on the WST security team,
Yeah,
because you're seeing them at different events, and
that's right. Yeah,
they become part of your story in the book in a way.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about the tour. I think I I do mention in the book as well. One thing I really picked up on it, and it got me thinking about how the players have to manage the schedule. I mean, I'm looking at where we are now. We're in early August, or nearly mid-August, I suppose, and we've got
Mm.
the China Open going on at the moment. We've had tournaments already. We've got a very busy program of snooker this season, which is great for the players, great for the economy of the sport. But I think it must take a toll on the players with all the traveling and all the stress of ranking points and prize money and demands on the time of the sponsors. So I thought that was quite insightful. That it may seem glamorous, because somebody's traveling around the world playing, top level elite sport. But what you possibly don't see is if that they're playing in front of five or six fans in a city in China, with a lot of pressure resting on that match. So that was something that certainly was an eye opener for me. And in
And
fact,
I really
snooker in
like that.
China, yeah,
Yeah.
was an eye opener in its own way,
Tell us more about snooker in China because not a lot of people have been there. Some do, some do, as I often point out on my snooker
Yeah,
services.
yeah.
British, UK fans, European fans do go to Chinese events, but clearly not many. Tell us more.
No, that's right. When I went to China, I went to the international championships, which were held in Tianjin, which is not too far from Beijing. So it's a short hop on the high speed train from Beijing. But it's a very different city to Beijing. It's smaller, but still, big compared to many of the cities in the UK, for instance. So I went to the international championships. I had a whole rigmarole about getting tickets, which involved lengthy car journeys through lashing rain to the outskirts of the city and everything else. But I managed to get the tickets in the end. Um, at the event itself, there's much more noise. The fans are very different in how they react to the snooker. Certainly, what I experienced than you'd get in the UK. So there's more background noise, and I think um, sometimes it must be difficult for players to readjust to that because they are playing in a very different atmosphere. Lots of enthusiasm for the fans. All of them wanted to know who my favourite player was, and they found it difficult when they say, well, these days I'm just happy to enjoy the game. When I was a young lad, it was Alex Higgins. I wanted him to win
Mm.
every match he played, but these days I'm just enjoying the sport for its own sake, and they weren't having this. What do you think? So I just said, well, in the end, Judd Trump's always playing well. He's always good to watch, and that seemed to work. There's a lot of support, obviously, for Ronnie, for Mark Selby, a lot of support for him over there. This was before the recent emergence, or I'd say resurgence, actually, of success for the Chinese players. But even then, you could feel it was bubbling under. There's something could be about to happen, and that was shown quite vividly with Zhang Gander, who I really enjoyed watching. He had a good tournament in Tianjin that year. He ended up winning the tournament. He also ended up getting a 147. Sadly, I was on a flight back to London at the time, so that was a bit of that was the one that got away. I'm not going to say too much more, but it wasn't the only
Oh,
one I missed out on in the book. So China is a great experience, and I think the difference now in 2026 is, and I don't want to sound like I'm working for the Chinese Tourism Board, but my understanding is it's easier because there's not the same visa problems as there were recently. So it's possibly easier to get to a tournament. And if you do have the opportunity, if anyone does have the opportunity to go out there, it's certainly a good experience for a snooker lover. So yeah, it was an experience all round.
oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
I'll have a name check in a moment, but one
yeah,
more question before that.
yeah,
Did you went to obviously some massive, the
yeah,
Crucible, some
yeah,
York, really well-known venues.
yeah,
You went to some lesser ones. So
yeah.
you've had a great contrast, of course, between the days when there weren't that many there, the home
Mm.
nations maybe, and the packed Crucible. And was there one that maybe a couple that you thought they stood out as just being special events to be at?
Well, I suppose the Crucible
Mm,
is the obvious answer, but I think it's an interesting one for me as well because I um, I spent a lot of time in Sheffield. I was at university in Sheffield in the mid 1980s,
mm.
but never actually managed to get to see any snooker at the Crucible at that time. Didn't have the money for one factor, but I first went to see snooker at the Crucible as recently as 2022, I think it was. Um, and I was amazed then how everything that's said about it is true. It's such an amazing, intimate atmosphere. You can feel the tension. so close to the players, and there's something magical about being in there. And actually, you spend a lot of time there wondering how are they actually playing the matches when they're using the two tables because it is so so small. So the Crucible is the obvious one, and I'm delighted that snooker's continuing at the Crucible. I am a bit of a traditionalist in many ways in sport,
Mm.
but I think there's widespread delight. I think when that was announced, so that's really positive news. I really like the Ali Pali
Mm.
for the Masters, and what I enjoyed a lot about being at that tournament was it was a big crowd, it was an enthusiastic crowd, and because the capacity is double the Crucible, you had more opportunity for fans to get in and see it. So that was really good. Felt it was very entertaining. I wasn't there for a particularly raucous crowd, but I could imagine, and everybody I've spoken to has backed this up, that it can get, it's probably one of the most atmospheric and feisty crowds you can get in for the Masters. And yeah, I enjoyed going to the Tempodrome in Berlin. That was a good experience, and many UK fans I know go out there and take in some of the snooker, which was great. But you just get a lot out of the geography of the places, like Llandudno being near the coast. I went to Belfast for the first time. I'd never been to Belfast until I did the book, so that was really good. And Edinburgh's always a delight to go to, isn't it? So that was great for the Scottish Open. I'm also quite fortunate where I live that we have tournaments that are accessible, Manchester, York as well. So yeah, it was a very interesting um, journey, almost like a travel journey as well as a snooker journey.
No, that's a brilliant
Yeah.
answer. And yeah, you're spoiled in the north. That's what you're saying. Snooker fans in the north of England are spoiled. We know that. You're a brilliant guest, and I couldn't be more delighted. I know the listeners will share that too. And I should say now, in terms of giving you a name check, that you are listening to Radio Snooker with Nick Metcalf, and I'm joined by a terrific special guest, Chris Shaw. Hello, everybody. It's Radio Snooker here with Nick Metcalf. It's great to have you for company. I'm with Chris Shaw, the author, talking about his book To the Max. And I mean, you've just talked about it with your last sort of answer there. You are going to some really interesting places. You mentioned Belfast,
Yeah.
some of the great cities in the UK, in terms of, York, one that's come to my old alma mater while I went to university all those decades ago. Manchester, what a wonderful city that is. Of course, we mentioned Sheffield. You're going to Berlin, of course, and that I made my first visit there only about a year and a half ago. The Tempodrome, blown away. Just what everyone said about it is so true. Of course, you're also touching, aren't you, on the history of these cities, what you're seeing. I loved your bit about London and about the funny relationship the Northerners sometimes have with London, which I really did get. But you are introducing other elements. This is not just a book and he potted the bluey. In fact, it's not about that at all, really. And he potted the pig. It's a wonderful sort of overview, taking in all your experiences, isn't it?
It is, and I think I mean there are some common characteristics of snooker fans I think around the country. But yeah, I did want to sort of also just dip into different historical or cultural experiences that you might get in different cities. As it's probably already come out in this interview, I'm also quite keen on the music, so there's quite a few musical references in the book as well. And I think that's one of the privileges actually of having the opportunity to go around and watch sport is it does unlock, you know, information. I always used to joke actually that when I was much younger, I would know the capital cities in South America through football.
Yeah.
That was part of my education, if you like, when I was much younger. So it is a real pleasure watching live sport, and I'm also very hopeful that, and I'm sure it will, that snooker will maintain this accessibility. I know it's so difficult to get tickets for the Crucible. We know that, and that's hopefully the bigger capacity will help. But one of the things I like about snooker, it is an accessible sport. still with the ticket pricing, which I know is a big topic at the moment, and rightly so. It's not cheap, but I think it's good value. And if you do book in advance, as I had to for my project, you can actually see some really high level snooker. But also, crucially, and this is my little plug for Judgment Day in Sheffield, you can see some dramatic stuff for a very, very reasonable cost in those couple of days leading up to the World Championship. So I think actually Judgment Day was one of the most pleasant surprises I had, because I didn't expect it to be quite as dramatic as it was, and it certainly is.
Yeah, and it's been one of the best additions to snooker in the last
Yeah,
sort of decade
yeah,
for me. And now, of course, we have it in the UK as well.
yeah,
It's they're magnificent highlights of the season, no question about it. They're so dramatic. I know people sometimes say, we can't, it'd be good to do this more often. Well, in a way, it wouldn't be good to do it more often, because you can't beat that time when there's just so much on the line, so
yeah,
much at stake, going from table to table. It is just absolutely brilliant. I think you've hit on
yeah,
something important there, and I'm guilty of this, and I
yeah,
think a lot of other people are as well. But I try and train myself away from it. When we talk about sort of ticket prices in snooker, we far too often mean the crucible.
mm,
And Christmas tickets are expensive now. They just are. Now I know people will say, well, actually, they're just market rates across other sports, and I'm one of those that thinks that maybe it was a bit undersold for a few years and it went up a bit too quickly, and that was the problem. There wasn't a sort of middle ground. But putting that aside, as you say, there are lots of other events.
yeah,
It's a long, long season, and a lot of them really are good value. I mean, I think you're someone that would get around to quite a lot of sport, probably even now, like, or certainly be aware of prices. Test
yeah,
cricket now is so expensive. I mean, it's very topical this very week. We're seeing in a European Athletics Championships in
yeah,
Birmingham, which has so far seen very poor crowds. And one of the reasons for that, people are saying, the tickets are too crazily expensive. Some of them are quite cheap. I'm going myself, actually, but a
yeah.
lot of them are just a lot. So,
Mm.
but what you're saying, I think to put it in perspective, you can still get those 10, 15, 20 quid deals, can't you? And that still feels nice in sport. You can get those. That's important.
That's right. I mean, I'm going to the British Open in Cheltenham next week, and the ticket is I don't even know if it's £20 for an afternoon session on the Friday. So yeah, there are really good deals to be had for snooker watchers, and I'm sure it is an untapped market in many ways, because we all associate it so much as a television sport, and of course that's how the majority of us were first exposed to it, and watch it now. But it does give you another dimension if you are able to go and watch it in an arena. It does. Um, yeah, you just see it in a different way in many ways, and you see the tension or feel the tension even more. So I'm hoping that snooker continues to attract good crowds. I think the challenge is always going to be, how do you get more to the early stages of tournaments? I think that's inevitable. That's always going to be a challenge. Um, and maybe there's ways of doing that and attracting new fans in, particularly for those early rounds.
Did it give you an even? I think you've hinted towards this,
Mm.
that it might be the case, but did it give you an even greater appreciation of what the players do, seeing them live in the arena, specifically on the 147, but also in general terms? Did you
Yeah,
come away thinking? I mean, you've already suggested how hard the game is, and amen to that.
sure. Yeah.
Did you come away thinking, God, these guys? You're almost awed by them at times, aren't you?
Ab-
AWED, you're almost awed by them.
Absolutely. Well, I think if we're watching television coverage, because of the quality, the direction, and everything else, we're watching the action, and we're seeing all the appropriate reactions of the players. There's a cutaway to the player in the non-striker who's watching the other player. What we don't see, though, is we don't see that a player could be lining up a tough yellow into the corner pocket, and they've actually got cameras in front of them as they're taking the shot. Now, the camera operators are extremely professional and keep still, but as the player's taking the shot, they've got this level of scrutiny. And I remember actually going back to the early 80s, there was a lot of discussion then about how players could play in the televised stages of tournaments. Could they handle the pressure when the cameras were on them? And I always thought this was slightly over the top because surely snooker's been played on the television. But it was only when I was in an arena and actually saw myself. That is an additional pressure that they've got this camera fixed on them, wait, following their every action and capturing the emotions when they've missed a pot as well. So that was something that was very clear to me when I was watching, and it's quite interesting because I said in the book that when you go to an event, you feel you're actually part of a TV audience. You know, you're watching a TV show almost because um, everything is based around the television coverage as it must be. So this nice contrast between watching in a live event and watching, watching as a fan. But what I do like about the snooker, of course, is you can be there at the Crucible just before the start of play, and you can actually hear the pundits talking about the prospects for the match, and that's really nice. Which, of course, you don't get, for instance, if you're at a football match. You can see the pundits on the pitch, but you can't actually hear what they're saying. So I do. That's what I do like. You feel part of a big occasion particularly at the Crucible, of course.
Yeah, a really lovely way of saying it up. Summing it up. How many reds would go down then before you started getting sweaty palms yourself and thinking, wait a minute, wait a minute. Would it be five, four, six, seven? What's
Well,
how many?
well, there was a saying in snooker. I think it was around about the 1990s of maximum alert. Um, so it's a maximum alert. Watch out, somebody could be on a maximum. I was on a permanent maximum alert from the moment I went into the arena because um, I can't miss what what happens if one happens. You've got to be ready for it. Just be prepared. Um, and then there was also a strange dynamic. So a frame would be you're watching the frame, and I actually in the end counted up and counted it up, and I probably watched about 600 live frames of snooker during these 147 hours. Um, so
Wow.
I saw a lot of snooker in that
Yeah.
time. And what would happen is a player would break off, and you would immediately look at have the Reds gone. So even before anyone's potted anything,
Yeah.
could this potentially be? If anything's gone awkward, you almost sort of breathe, disappointed. This isn't going to happen
Especially if the
again.
black's gone awkward.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. The classic case of will it pot to both pockets is a key early indicator, even before anyone's potted anything. But yeah, there were a few occasions when it was, five or six reds and blacks and thinking, okay, yeah, maximum alert, yeah. Um, but my hopes were dashed on more than one occasion. And
Uh,
also the other classic disappointment is when you've booked to see the snooker on the Wednesday at a tournament, only to find out that there is a 147 made, but it's not on the day that you were there. And that happened to me most significantly at the Masters. So I went to the first day of the Masters, which was great, and saw some wonderful snooker. Came home, and a couple of days later, I'm at home watching a 147. So just bad
were you throwing stuff at the telly?
luck.
Furious.
Yeah, there were a few sort of angry comments. I've got to admit, yeah. But I think, I think the other important thing about it is you then got to appreciate, when a really good big break's been made. Someone's made 145, and you've got to remember this is actually an extraordinary achievement in its own right. Okay,
Yeah,
we've taken a
true.
blue rather than a black, and I mentioned briefly Doug Mountjoy before. Of course, he made a 145 before Davis made the first 147, and that got a lot of media attention at the time because it was the record break ever made, and it was very close to a maximum, even though the maximum was never really on because Mountjoy potted a blue relatively early on in the break. So yeah, so you know we want to get to the max, but we also shouldn't forget when players have got very high breaks, and of course the importance of the break in the context of the match is also very important, isn't it? We should never lose sight of that the old cliche only wins you one frame.
Of course.
Yeah.
And there was someone did a study a few years ago, and I, I was surprised. I think it was still quite heavily weighted in the favour of the players that made maximum did win their matches. It just seems to me they so often lose their
Mm,
matches. Happened
yeah,
again a couple of times recently, but yeah, their
yeah,
stats don't lie. Most
mm,
of the time they've been winning. But I'm not
mm,
being flippant here when I
mm,
say I've known lots of snooker fans over the years in lots of different situations, and it can even be more specific than you said about different
mm.
days. It could be on a different table. If you've got four table, it can be on the.
Yeah,
Sometimes you've got a view of two or maybe a view of three, but not a view of the fourth. That's where the 147's made. Or with the greatest one in the world, it could be a call of nature. They won't let you in the following frame. You just never know, do you?
that's
I
right.
think that's again the eternal beauty of this. It can happen in any single frame.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why it was very much an alcohol-free um, trip for me. I
Yeah,
did take my research very seriously this time and
yeah.
made sure that if I committed to being there for the session, I was there for the session, and I watched. I was being as professional as I possibly could in the pursuit of the maximum.
That's brilliant to hear. I mean, I've got to ask, there are a lot being made now. Are
Mm.
you worried that into the future that too much of the shine might be taken off what is something so special because it's doing. I mean, I have to be honest, on news
Mm.
desks now when I'm at, there's not the same levels of
No,
coverage, a
yeah,
little bit like the nine data. Is that
yeah.
something you'd be concerned about?
In some ways, yes, because again, going back to the first one, the Davis one, that was a huge sporting moment. So to fast forward a few years after Davis made his maximum, I think it was the Independent newspaper, but certainly one of the newspapers had some of the what were the big sporting highlights of the 20th century, and the Davis Maximum was in there. That was considered one of the landmarks, such as the 4 minute mile being beaten, that kind of thing.
No, right.
We're a long way from that now, and I think it's probably going to be more contextual in the future, isn't it? So, what is the 147 that levels up a Crucible final, which takes it to a decider? I actually thought on this is an interesting one. I thought, wouldn't a 147 and a decider be the ultimate? But I don't think it would be because, of course, the match is then decided, the title's then decided after about 70 odd 80 points. So actually the perfect time for a 147 would be to take it into a decider, arguably. But that's just my opinion. Um
Oh, I like that specific
so I
comment.
think
Yeah.
that would be my dream one. I think if it if I was in the crucible for the final stages on that Monday night of the final, to see that 147 to take it to the decider, that would be the dream. So I think it's going to be contextual. I think they're going to be ones which are still talked about, remembered. Um, I still think it's going to be special for the fans, though. The fans still talk about wanting to see them. You only have to talk to fans who've seen them even in exhibitions, and they say, it's a great thrill for them to see this being performed. And it is a performance because by the time a player, as we all know, is on a really big break, a century and more, the frame's already won. The outcome of the competition, if you like, has been decided. It then becomes a test of the individual quality of the player. So I think we're always going to enjoy watching them. At least I hope we will.
I think you're right. I think for fans being there, and ultimately, isn't it just a case of continuing excellence in sport,
Yeah,
whatever it is. It's golfers
mm,
hitting the ball further
yeah,
and making better rounds. It's just athletes running faster. It's going to happen. That's just the nature of sport. And, there is still a cachet about it. Let's keep it in perspective. It's only 240 odd over what, getting on for half a century now, or certainly 40 odd years. So it's something that's still sort of so special in this sport. And it's important to sort of keep selling it, isn't it? Because in a way, we're quite lucky, a bit like darts is lucky with the nine data, because we have winners of tournaments, they're great. We have winners of, who's going to be world number one. But to have an achievement linked in with the sport is something we should keep hold of as much as we can, eh?
absolutely. Because there's only a few sports which have got this excellence, bar that you can actually measure it
Mm.
objectively. Again, I go back to, I think it was Nadia Comaneci, wasn't it, when she got the perfect score in gymnastics,
You're
which
not that old. Come on.
oh, I'm afraid I am.
You know.
And that was considered to be, that was perfection. It was a 10 in gymnastics. But my point has always been that, or ice skating, figure skating, that they are, or diving, whatever, they are judged. They're judged on objective measures, but it's not like something which you can't argue about. You can't argue about a hole in one, a nine darter, or a 147. You can argue about which is the more difficult, but that's another story altogether. Yeah, so I think we also have a really appreciation of something that is so off the scale. He died recently, sadly, but Gary Sober's six sixes, in the
Oh, God.
that passed into folklore, and it was an incredible achievement. That was the perfect over, if you like, and the 147's the perfect frame.
In Swansea. Yeah, and it's great seeing clips of that recently, actually,
Yeah,
when we
yeah,
lost the great Sir Gary, of course. Well, as I often do when I come towards the end of these, I say, is there anything that I really missed that you would have loved to sort of add? And in particular, please in a moment tell us more about where we
yeah,
can get the book. But
yeah.
are there any more details you'd like to sort of mention that I may not have sort of come across, or details you want to convey that to the
Yeah.
listener that you've got in the book?
Well, I suppose it's just a thank you to the people, including yourself, Nick, and everybody else who's really been very supportive of this book. It's meant a lot to me, that, because um, as somebody who works in sports journalism, you become accustomed to people telling you no a lot, particularly if you're asking for a
Mm.
quote at the wrong time. Had a tremendous amount of support from the snooker community. All kinds of different people gladly gave her the time, spoke to me about the 147s, players, officials, as I say, referees. I spoke to a couple of referees, particularly about this. So that's one of the really nice takeaways for me. Every sport has its critics, and snooker's no
Yeah.
different. But there's a lot to be proud and appreciative, I think, in snooker. And I really enjoyed following the tour for that season. I'm back in the real world now, back in full-time work, and so I can't do it these days. But I certainly enjoy dipping in and out, and just getting a sense of the appreciation for the sport. Yes, it's not as big as it used to be in the early 80s, but I know you've said this before in other forums, that there's more snooker that we can watch now than there's ever been the case before. So, and there are more tournaments, and it's a much more of an international sport now. So I think there's a lot to be excited about as well for snooker overall.
Well, that's a really good and positive way to sort of wrap up and just say, where can people get hold of To the Max? I know you said off the air you've already
Yeah,
got, you're holding it
yeah,
up there, but folks, I'm gonna do a rare video special. Now, honestly, I know you don't necessarily work day to day in sports
yeah.
journalism now. If you did, what they'll say to you is, have you got a video with that, mate? So I'm doing my bit. I've got a video with that, mate. But yeah, you're holding it up. Tell us where we can get it.
Okay, so the book's available on Amazon and other online stores, and it's called To the Max, and the subtitle is Celebrating Snooker's 147 Break. And I hope everybody enjoys it. And dare I say, if you want to leave me a review on Amazon, that would be very nice as well.
And they're important, aren't they? I did one book back in the day. Those reviews, we're told that for our pod works, by the way. I don't quite know exactly why. It's probably all that bloody algorithms that's driven into us.
Yeah.
But those reviews do count. They boost it. So that, yeah, please do that. And Chris, congratulations. To write a book is a big achievement, and to write one that's been so well received and I know will be loved is hats off to you. So well done. You must have had such a sense of achievement when it finally and relief, was it? Big relief?
Yeah, it is a feeling of relief, because you live with this, and there comes a time when you think you're never going to get the book published, but yeah, definitely, really been enjoyable, and I'm glad it's out. and I'm maybe not finished with snooker yet, so I'm looking at other possible projects, which we'll see what happens with them. But I enjoyed it a lot, so I'm hoping there might be a sequel. You never know.
Wow, that's a nice little teaser. Well, thank you very much indeed, Chris. It's really great that you came here on Radio Snooker to talk about your excellent book, To the Max. And again, sir, just Kate, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Nick. And it's been great to chat to you today. So thank you very much.
And sir, please do now feel you can just disappear on the Zooms. I'm going to waffle along to my listeners with a little bit more snooker chat. So feel free to disappear. It's been great
Brilliant.
to have you with me. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And I know you're going to love that book, folks. You know, having really devoured it myself. There's so many great, elements to it. It's so interesting just in terms of following the tour to different venues and just, there's such a great cachet about the Maximum Break. So, please do buy To the Max. It's a cracking book from Chris Shaw. A bit more from me before I disappear then, just to say that the Snooker Podcast Summertime Special with Dave Hendon, Phil Haig and myself is available now. And again, getting some nice feedback. Thank you very much indeed for that. Phil and I will return next week, actually, on Talking Snooker to review the China Open and look ahead to the Wuhan Open. I hope you're enjoying the China Open, by the way. It's live on the UK on TNT Sports and HBO Max through until Sunday. And what else can I say then away from the world of snooker? Demi Vollering from the Netherlands won the Tour de France Femme, the first multiple winner of the event. I mentioned earlier when I was chatting with Chris, the European Athletics Championships taking place this week in Birmingham. I say I'm off there myself soon to see a night of action. It has been disappointing so far with the crowds. I think, as a learned friend of mine pointed out, it's quite rare for this championship to be 7 days, actually. It has sometimes been five in the last 10, 15 years, often six. So seven might be a stretch. I think ticket prices is a factor as well. I have been impressed with the way, by the way, the BBC haven't ignored the issue. They have been talking about the empty seats. I think that's the right way to do it. So, and I do understand that from around Thursday, they are picking up a lot. They're nearly sellouts, actually. So it will end. I always think with any sport, really, if you see an arena with poor crowds, compared to good crowds, it just doesn't look as good. But I think athletics is kind of marked like that. There's nothing more special than seeing a full athletic stadium. When it's sort of, as it has been so far, sort of drips and drabs of people, it is a disappointment. Just to say as well, coming next week, the return of the Premier League. And that means that I will go around the grounds and around the country with the best audio and video coverage I can muster from English football's top division. All being well, I'll be back later in the week with some China Open news for you. Got to say, though, thanks again to my terrific guest, Chris Shaw. And as ever, so grateful for your company. Keep your thoughts coming. A little bit tumbleweed on the email. I know it's summer, but it would be great to hear from you. Radiosnooker@mail.com or tweet me at Radio Snooker. But for now, this is your old friend, Nick Metcalf, saying that's your lot for this time. See you next time.